The rain came down in sheets that night. Cold Montana rain that turned the parking lot behind Rosie's Diner into a mirror of neon and darkness. Four black SUVs formed a semicircle, their headlights cutting through the downpour like searchlights at a prison break. Colt Maddox stood in the center of it all, 67 years old, 6 feet of weathered leather and quiet determination. Behind him, pressed against the diner's back wall, a young woman trembled, 19 years old, waitress uniform soaked through, and beside her, a boy, 12, eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes when you understand your life might end before you've really lived it. 8 men with rifles, AR-15s, military grade, the kind of hardware that doesn't belong in a town of 4,000 souls. They stood in formation, professional, mercenaries, not thugs. That made them more dangerous. A man stepped forward from the lead SUV, tall, barrel-chested, moving with the controlled aggression of someone who'd learned to kill for a living and never quite stopped. Vincent Reeves, former Navy SEAL, dishonorably discharged, the kind of man who wore his past sins like armor. Maddox, Vincent's voice carried over the rain, give us the girl. This isn't your fight. Colt didn't move. His hand rested near his belt, where a Colt 1911 waited, .45 caliber, same weapon he'd carried in Kuwait. The weight of it was familiar, comforting, in the way old habits can be. I don't look for trouble, Colt said. His voice was gravel and whiskey. Decades of cigarettes he'd quit 20 years ago still lived in that voice. But I don't run when it comes looking. The sound of 8 safeties clicking off, metallic, final. Vincent smiled. You're making a mistake, old man. Wouldn't be my first. The morning had started the way most mornings started for Colt Maddox. 5:30, coffee black as crude oil. The sun not yet thinking about rising over the mountains that ringed his property like ancient guardians. His garage smelled of motor oil and memories. 50 years of accumulated tools hung on pegboards with the precision of a military armory. Everything in its place, everything with a purpose. The Harley sat in the center bay, a 2010 Road King, black, but not showroom black. Working black, the kind of black that came from 10,000 miles of highway and another 10,000 of back roads that didn't show up on maps. Colt ran his hand along the fuel tank, checking for imperfections he wouldn't find. This was ritual, not maintenance. The bike was perfect because he made it perfect. Every bolt torqued to specification. Every cable adjusted to the millimeter. Some men went to church. Colt Maddox worshipped at the altar of mechanical precision. On the wall above his workbench, a photograph, faded, curling at the edges. 2 men in desert camouflage, younger versions of themselves, both of them. The one on the left was Colt at 45, leaner, harder, the kind of hard that comes from sleeping on sand and waking up to gunfire. The man on the right was Marcus Graves, best friend, brother in all but blood, dead 26 years now. Below the photograph, a shadow box. Inside it, a Marine Corps emblem, a set of dog tags, a Purple Heart, and a folded American flag that had once draped a coffin. Colt didn't look at the shadow box every day, but he knew it was there. That was enough. He loaded his saddlebags with the efficiency of long practice. A toolkit, a first aid kit that would have impressed a field medic, a Glock 19 in a waterproof case, because the Colt in his belt was for show more than anything. Paper maps because GPS could fail and probably would when you needed it most. A change of clothes, toothbrush, razor, and wrapped in oilcloth at the very bottom of the left bag, a handkerchief, blue fabric, embroidered with small yellow flowers, forget-me-nots. His wife Evelyn had made it 30 years ago, back when her hands were steady and the cancer was just a word that happened to other people. She'd been gone 5 years. The handkerchief still smelled like her perfume, lavender and vanilla. Colt had no idea how. Science couldn't explain it. He wasn't looking for explanations. The Harley roared to life on the first kick. Of course it did. Colt Maddox's machines didn't fail. He rolled out of the garage as dawn painted the sky in shades of copper and gold. The ride to Clearwater would take 6 hours. Highway 200 through mountains that had watched over Montana since before Montana had a name. Every year, the same trip. Every year, the same destination. The annual reunion of the Devil Dogs, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. The men who'd survived Desert Storm in the years after. The men who'd come home when so many hadn't. Every year, fewer of them showed up. Age and illness, and the slow grind of time doing what bullets and bombs had failed to do. But Colt went anyway. Because traditions mattered. Because remembering mattered. Because Marcus Graves was buried in Clearwater, and some debts could never be repaid, but had to be acknowledged anyway. The highway unspooled beneath his wheels. 2 lanes of asphalt cutting through pine forests and meadows where elk grazed in the early light. This was God's country, and God could have it. Colt preferred the parts where human beings still made decisions that mattered. At mile marker 87, he stopped for gas. A lonely station where the pumps still had mechanical counters and the clerk still made change without looking at a computer screen. The kind of place that was dying out, slowly becoming myth. While the tank filled, Colt noticed the SUV, black, suburban model, sitting at the far end of the lot near the air compressor that hadn't worked since Bush Sr. was president. 2 men inside, black suits, white shirts, no ties, earpieces visible even from 30 yards away. Security contractors. Colt had known enough of them to spot the type. The way they sat, the way they scanned, the way their hands never strayed far from their hips where weapons would be holstered. He memorized the license plate. 7 Tango Bravo, X-ray 429. Colorado plates. Long way from home. He topped off the tank, paid in cash, and rolled back onto the highway. The SUV didn't follow, but Colt checked his mirrors every 30 seconds for the next hour anyway. Old habits. The kind that kept you alive. Clearwater, Montana looked like every other small town that had seen better days and was waiting patiently for them to return. Main Street was 6 blocks of brick storefronts, half of them empty, the other half hanging on through force of will and local loyalty. Population 4,000 and change, the change being whoever was born or died that week. But something was different. Colt felt it before he saw it, that tickle at the base of his skull that combat veterans learned to trust because it was the difference between walking point and coming home in a bag. New cameras, security cameras mounted on light poles, on building corners, covering angles that a town like Clearwater had no business securing. These weren't the cheap box store models that recorded fuzzy footage of shoplifters. These were professional grade, pan tilt zoom, night vision capable, the kind that governments bought, or corporations with something to hide. Colt rolled down Main Street at exactly 25 miles per hour, noticing, cataloging, 2 more black SUVs parked outside the bank. Same Colorado plates. Same type of men pretending not to watch everyone who passed. He found Rosie's Diner on 3rd Street, red neon sign, chrome-edged windows, a slice of 1950-something preserved in amber and grease. The parking lot was half full, trucks mostly, working trucks with toolboxes and mud flaps. Good. Working people meant honest conversations and news that mattered. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and bacon and the American dream before it got complicated. Black and white checkered floor, red vinyl booths, a long counter with chrome stools bolted to the floor, a jukebox in the corner playing Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues. Appropriate, Colt thought, given that Clearwater was starting to feel like a town under occupation. He chose the corner booth, always the corner booth, back to the wall, eyes on the door, lines of sight to both exits and the kitchen pass-through. These weren't paranoid choices. They were survival choices. And after 67 years on Earth, and 22 of them in uniform, Colt Maddox was very good at surviving. The menu was laminated and sticky. The prices were reasonable. Colt ordered without looking. Steak, medium rare, mashed potatoes, coffee, black. Simple food for complicated times. The waitress who took his order was young, 19, maybe 20, Dark brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, green eyes that had seen too much and were trying not to show it. Her name tag said, Ilara. She wore the uniform of every small-town diner in America. Black pants, white shirt, apron with pockets full of pens and order pads, and the accumulated weight of tips that never quite added up to enough. But Colt noticed other things. The bruise on her left wrist. Small, finger-sized, the kind that came from someone grabbing too hard. She tried to cover it with a long-sleeved shirt under her uniform. Almost succeeded. Her hands shook when she poured his coffee. Not a lot, just enough. And her eyes kept flicking to the counter where two men sat. Black suits, white shirts, the same men from the gas station. Or men just like them. She left the coffee pot and moved to the next table. Professional smile, practiced words. But Colt had learned to read body language in places where words were lies, and survival depended on understanding what people weren't saying. Ilara Brennan was terrified, and working very hard to hide it. The steak arrived 15 minutes later, cooked right, seasoned well. Colt ate slowly, savoring each bite. Not because the food was remarkable. It was diner food, good and honest but not spectacular. He ate slowly because he was watching. The two men at the counter, the cook who kept glancing at Ilara, the manager who wiped down tables with the intensity of someone trying to look busy while thinking about something else entirely. Halfway through the steak, Ilara came back with the coffee pot. Her hand trembled as she poured. And as she leaned over to top off the cup, something fell from her apron. A small piece of paper. Folded once, it landed on the table next to Colt's plate, then slid off, onto the floor, beside his boot. Ilara gasped, dropped to her knees. "I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy today." And then she was under the table, in the space between the booth and the floor, where no one could see her face, where the two men at the counter couldn't read her lips. "Just keep eating," she whispered. Her voice was raw, desperate, the kind of desperation that came when hope was running out, and this was the last roll of the dice. "I'll make it worthwhile. They're making me open the bank tonight, 2 a.m. If I don't, they'll kill my brother. Please, you look like you used to be military." Colt didn't stop chewing, didn't look down, didn't react at all except to take another bite of steak and another sip of coffee. His voice was barely a murmur. "Where's your brother?" "I don't know. They let me call him twice a day, to prove he's alive. Please, I don't have anyone else." "I'll help." 2 words. Quiet. Certain. Ilara stayed under the table for another few seconds, picking up the imaginary items she dropped. When she stood, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. The practiced smile of someone who'd learned to hide pain behind customer service. She walked away. Colt bent down, slow and casual, picked up the piece of paper that had actually fallen, unfolded it under the table. Written in cramped handwriting, Finn, 12 years old, Old Mill District, 406-555-0147. Colt committed the number to memory. Then he ate the paper, chewed it thoroughly, swallowed it with coffee. It tasted like pulp and fear. He finished his steak, left a $50 bill under his plate, walked out of Rosie's Diner like a man who had nowhere important to be and all day to get there. But his mind was already working, running calculations, assessing threats, planning contingencies. Because Colt Maddox had made a promise, and a man was only as strong as his promises. The Harley fired up with a rumble that echoed off the brick buildings. Colt rolled through Clearwater, taking in every detail. The bank, 2-story brick building, classical architecture, cornerstones dated 1896. But the security system was new, very new. Cameras on every corner, motion sensors visible in the windows, reinforced door frames. This wasn't small-town banking. This was fortress banking. Across the street, another black SUV, 2 more men in suits, watching, waiting, guarding something that needed guarding. Colt filed it all away. Then he headed for the one place in Clearwater where he might get straight answers. The Last Stand Saloon was 3 blocks off Main Street. Neon sign, dark windows, the kind of bar that catered to men who drank to remember, not forget. Inside, the air was thick with decades of cigarette smoke that no amount of legislation could quite eliminate. Pool table in the back, bar running the length of the left wall, booths on the right, Merle Haggard on the jukebox. Wade Garrison sat at the bar, 60 years old, sheriff's uniform, star on his chest, gun on his hip. A shot of bourbon and a beer back in front of him, both untouched. He looked up when Colt walked in, and something like relief crossed his face. Colt Maddox, thought that was your bike outside. Wade, Colt took the stool next to him, ordered bourbon. Neat. Been a while. 2 years, since the funeral. Wade didn't specify whose funeral. In a town like Clearwater, everyone knew everyone's grief. They sat in comfortable silence for a minute. 2 men who'd learned patience in places where impatience got you killed. Finally, Colt spoke. "Something's wrong in your town, Wade." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "What makes you say that?" Black SUVs, Colorado plates, professional security, cameras on every corner, banks fortified like it's holding the gold from Fort Knox. And people are scared. I can smell it. Wade stared at his bourbon like it might hold answers. 3 months ago, a man named Vincent Reeves rolled into town. Said he was a real estate developer, had money, lots of it, started buying properties, hiring locals, promised to bring business back to Clearwater. But Vincent Reeves is former Navy SEAL, dishonorably discharged, 2008, killed civilians in Afghanistan, claimed they were combatants. Military tribunal disagreed. Wade finally picked up his bourbon, drained it. He's got connections, political connections. Senator Harlan Voss, ever heard of him? Colt shook his head. Montana senator, Committee on Banking and Finance, clean record, family man, all-American success story. Wade's voice dripped sarcasm. Except he's dirty, land deals, kickbacks, $500 million in illegal development contracts. But nobody can touch him because all the evidence is locked away where investigators can't get to it. The bank, Wade nodded, Deposit Box 247, Clearwater Bank and Trust, contains USB drives and documents that would put Voss in prison for the rest of his life. And Reeves is here to destroy it. Colt digested this. How do you know? Because Roger Whitmore told me. Bank manager, good man, deacon at the Baptist church, coaches Little League. 3 days ago he came to my office, crying, said they took his grandson, 8 years old. Said if Roger didn't cooperate, the boy dies. And you can't help him. I tried, called the state police, called the FBI. Every call gets routed back to me with the same message. Don't interfere with ongoing investment in Clearwater. Someone high up is protecting Reeves, someone with enough juice to shut down law enforcement. Colt felt the old, familiar burn, the one that came before decisions that couldn't be undone. How many? What? How many hostages? Wade looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the Marine Colt used to be, the man who'd gone into burning buildings and come out carrying children, the soldier who'd violated orders because orders were just words and people were flesh and blood. 6 children, all from families Reeves needs. The bank manager, the security guard, the mayor's assistant who has after-hours access to City Hall, a waitress at Rosie's Diner who serves Roger Whitmore every morning and could get close to him. 2 others, all leverage, all insurance that nobody talks, nobody fights back. Where are they holding the kids? I don't know. I've looked. Sent deputies on patrols. Nothing. Reeves is smart. He's using locals for everything visible. His real people, the security contractors, they stay in the shadows. I can't even get a count of how many there are. Colt finished his bourbon, set the glass down with careful precision. The waitress, Ilara, that's her brother? Wade went very still. How do you know Ilara? She asked me for help. Colt, don't. You're 67 years old. These are professionals, military contractors. They will kill you and bury you where nobody finds the body. Won't be the first time someone tried. God damn it, Colt, I'm serious. I've got 4 deputies, good men, but they're not soldiers. I can't protect you. I can't even protect my own town. Colt stood, dropped 2 20s on the bar. Then I guess it's lucky I don't need protecting. What are you going to do? What I should have done a long time ago. Colt headed for the door, stopped, turned back. Marcus Graves. You remember him? Wade nodded. Everyone who'd served with 3rd Battalion remembered Marcus. He died because I made a choice. I chose to save civilians instead of following orders. Colt paused. Turns out making the right choice doesn't always feel right, but you make it anyway, because that's what separates us from them. He walked out into the fading afternoon light. The sun was dropping behind the mountains. Soon it would be dark. And in the dark, things happened that couldn't happen in daylight. Colt pulled out a burner phone he'd bought at a truck stop in Idaho, dialed the number from memory. It rang 4 times. Hello? A girl's voice, shaking, scared. This is Colt Maddox. I was at Rosie's today. You asked me for help. A sharp intake of breath. You're really going to help? I'm really going to help, but I need to see you. Somewhere they're not watching. The parking lot, behind the diner, 9 tonight. I get off at 8:30. They'll follow me home, but I can lose them for 10 minutes. 9 o'clock, I'll be there. The line went dead. Colt pocketed the phone, looked up at the mountains. They'd been there for millions of years. They'd be there for millions more. Human problems were brief and brutal and ultimately meaningless in the grand scope of geology, but they meant everything to the people living them. And Colt Maddox had stopped caring about the grand scope a long time ago. Night fell over Clearwater like a curtain, the kind of mountain darkness that was absolute. No light pollution, no ambient glow, just stars and moon and the cold certainty of your own insignificance under the vastness of space. Colt waited in the parking lot behind Rosie's diner. His Harley was parked 2 blocks away, out of sight. He stood in the shadow of the dumpster enclosure, invisible, patient. Being still was a skill, one the Marines had beaten into him, one he'd never forgotten. At 9:05, Ilara appeared. She walked quickly, looking over her shoulder every few steps, wore a jacket over her diner uniform, hands shoved in pockets. She scanned the parking lot, didn't see Colt, and her shoulders slumped. Over here. His voice was barely louder than the wind. She spun, saw him step out of the shadows. Jesus, you scared me. Good. If I can't scare you, I can't help you. They stood 10 feet apart. Ilara studied him, really looked at him for the first time. The weathered face, the scars on his hands, the way he held himself, balanced and ready. The eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine and carried them without breaking. You're really military, she said, not a question. Was. Long time ago. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Colt was quiet for a moment, deciding how much truth to share. 26 years ago, I had to make a choice. Save people who needed saving or follow orders. I chose people. My best friend died because of that choice. Ever since, I've had to live with wondering if I made the right call. Did you? He thought so. Told me right before he died that it was the right thing. That's what mattered, not the orders, not the mission, the people. Colt took a step closer. Your brother needs saving. I'm going to save him. That's all you need to know. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away angrily. His name is Finn. He's 12. They took him from school 3 days ago. Black van. 2 men. I was at work. By the time I found out, they'd already called me. Said if I told anyone, if I went to the police, Finn would disappear. They let me talk to him twice a day. 30 seconds. Just enough to know he's alive. When's your next call? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Good. When you talk to him, listen for background noise. Anything. Train whistles, church bells, dogs barking, traffic, anything that might tell us where they're holding him. Ilara nodded. There's something else. The bank. They're not just robbing it. There's a deposit box. Number 247. It has evidence. Political corruption. Senator Voss. $500 million in illegal land deals. I know, the sheriff told me. They're going to destroy it. The evidence. Then they're going to kill everyone who knows about it. Roger, the other families, me, Finn. Her voice broke. Even if I do what they want, we're dead. Colt reached into his jacket, pulled out the blue handkerchief, the one embroidered with forget-me-nots, held it out to her. What's this? A promise. My wife made it. She's gone now. But this is how I make promises that matter. You hold on to it. When I bring Finn back, I'll take it back. Until then, you'll know I'm coming. Ilara took the handkerchief with shaking hands, stared at it like it was the most valuable thing she'd ever held. Maybe it was. I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything. Just survive until I can fix this. How? They're everywhere. They're watching me. They're watching everyone. You're just one man. Colt smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. That's where you're wrong. I'm not alone, and neither are you. A car door slammed somewhere nearby. Ilara jumped. I have to go. They'll notice if I'm gone too long. Go. Be careful. Don't do anything different. Don't act like you have hope. That's what they'll notice. She started to leave. Stopped. Turned back. Why did you come to Clearwater? What brought you here? An old friend. He's buried here. I come every year to visit. What was his name? Marcus. Marcus Graves. Tell him thank you. From me. Because if he hadn't died, you wouldn't be the man who stopped today. The man who listened when I crawled under that table. She was gone before Colt could respond. Disappeared into the darkness like smoke. Colt stood alone in the parking lot. Above him, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Indifferent. Eternal. He thought about Marcus, about Kuwait, about the choice he'd made and the price Marcus had paid, about whether redemption was something you earned or something you took by force. Tomorrow, he'd start taking it by force. But tonight, he had one more visit to make. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Clearwater. 40 acres of granite and memory. Rows of white crosses marching in formation like soldiers who'd finally stopped marching. The gate was wrought iron, old. The hinges creaked when Colt pushed through. Nobody maintained this place after dark. That was fine. The dead didn't need maintenance. They needed remembering. Marcus Graves rested in the veterans section. Plot 7, row 12. The headstone was simple, white marble. His name, his rank, his dates. 1967 to 1991. 24 years old. Too young. But then, every soldier who died was too young. Age was just a number the living used to measure loss. Colt knelt. His knees protested. 67 years of hard living compressed into joints that remembered every jump from every helicopter and every mile humped through every desert. He ignored the pain. Pain was just information. It told you that you were still alive. Hey, Marcus. His voice was quiet, not because the dead could hear, but because some conversations deserved reverence. Been a year. I know. I always say that. Every time I come here, I tell you it's been a year. Like you're keeping track. The wind moved through the pine trees. Colt took it as an answer. Got myself into something. You'd probably tell me I'm too old for this, that I should let it go. Call the authorities. Let someone else handle it. He ran his hand over the cold marble. But we both know that's not how it works. Not when kids are involved. Not when the authorities are the ones looking the other way. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small metal case, opened it. Inside, a bronze star. Marcus's bronze star. The one they'd pinned on his coffin during the funeral. The one Colt had kept because Marcus's mother had pressed it into his hand and said, he'd want you to have this. He'd want you to remember why he did it. I'm going to do it again, brother. Break the rules. Violate orders. Go against people who have more power and more money and more guns. Just like Kuwait. Just like that family we pulled out of that compound. Colt's jaw tightened. Difference is, this time I'm not losing anyone. This time, everyone comes home. He placed the bronze star on the headstone, left it there. a promise made tangible. I'll be back for this. When it's done, when those kids are safe and the bad guys are in the ground or in handcuffs, I'll come back and tell you how it went, just like always. The walk back to his bike took 10 minutes. The ride to Pete Callahan's place took 20. Colt had made the call on his way to the cemetery. Pete had answered on the first ring. Hadn't asked questions, just said, "Give me an hour to make some calls. Meet at the garage." That was the thing about Marines. They didn't need explanations. They needed coordinates and objectives. Everything else was just noise. Pete's garage and bar sat on the edge of Clearwater, where Main Street gave up pretending to be civilized and admitted it was just another road leading nowhere in particular. The building was corrugated steel and cinder block. Functional, ugly, perfect. 3 bays for vehicles. A 4th bay converted into a bar where men who worked with their hands could drink beer and lie about the fish that got away and the women who'd been stupid enough to leave them. 4 motorcycles were parked out front when Colt arrived. Harleys, all of them. Different models, different years, but the same attitude. Chrome and steel and American engineering refined into its purest form. Transportation as philosophy. Inside, 4 men waited. Colt knew them all, had served with 2 of them, had drunk with all of them, had trusted them with his life, and would again without hesitation. Pete Callahan stood behind the makeshift bar, 65 years old, built like a fire hydrant, bald by choice, not genetics, tattoos covering both arms, Army infantry, First Gulf War, 2 Purple Hearts, a silver star he never talked about. Owner and operator of the only garage in Clearwater that could rebuild a transmission and serve a decent whiskey at the same time. Colt Maddox. Pete's voice was gravel in a cement mixer. When you call and say you need help, I listen. When you say bring the boys, I make calls. When you say don't ask questions yet, I don't ask questions yet. He poured bourbon into a glass, slid it across the bar. But now you're here, so now I'm asking. Colt took the bourbon, looked at the other 3 men. Garrett Sullivan, 62. Everyone called him Hawk because his eyes were sharp and his patience was infinite. Air Force, surveillance and reconnaissance. 20 years analyzing satellite feeds and intercepted communications. Retired 5 years ago when his wife got sick. Buried her 3 years ago. Now he lived alone in a cabin with more computers than furniture and more secrets than friends. Elias Monroe, 68, docked to everyone who'd ever served with him. Navy corpsman, 3 tours in Iraq, saw more blood and held more dying men than any human should have to. Came home and became a country doctor. Delivered babies and set broken bones and prescribed antibiotics for strep throat. But his real medical kit, the military one, still lived in his truck, just in case. Nash Brenner, 60, Army Ranger. Silent as stone and twice as hard, expert marksman, could put a round through a keyhole at 800 yards in a crosswind, ran a gun range outside town, taught hunter safety to teenagers and tactical shooting to police departments, kept to himself, trusted 3 people in the world. Colt was one of them. These were the brothers, not by blood, by something stronger, by the kind of bond that formed when you depended on each other to stay alive and came home when so many didn't. Colt set down his glass. 6 children have been kidnapped, hostages, insurance to make sure their families cooperate with a criminal operation run by a former SEAL named Vincent Reeves. He's planning to rob Clearwater Bank tonight, not for money, for evidence. Political corruption, $500 million. If he succeeds, he'll destroy the evidence and kill the hostages, all of them, including a 12-year-old boy named Finn and his 19-year-old sister, Ilara, who asked me for help this afternoon. Silence. The kind of silence that preceded storms. Finally, Nash spoke. His voice was like wind through dead trees. You know where the kids are? No, but I'm going to find out. You know how many men Reeves has? At least 8, probably more. You know they're professionals, former military, men who kill for money and sleep just fine afterward? Yes, Nash nodded, picked up his beer, drained it. Okay, I'm in. Pete laughed, short, sharp. Of course you're in, you crazy bastard. We're all in. Question is, what's the plan? Colt pulled out a hand-drawn map, spread it on the bar. Reeves needs 3 things to succeed. The bank manager, Roger Whitmore, the waitress, Ilara, who has access to Roger, and chaos. Enough confusion that law enforcement can't respond before he's done. He tapped the map. We're going to give him chaos, just not the kind he expects. Hawk leaned forward, studied the map. You want to hit them while they hit the bank. No, I want to hit them before they hit the bank. Find the hostages, extract them, take away Reeves's leverage. Once the kids are safe, the families can talk. Sheriff Garrison can call in the FBI without worrying about political blowback, and Reeves becomes just another criminal facing justice. Sounds simple, Doc said. His voice carried the skepticism of a man who'd seen simple plans become complicated casualties. So what's the catch? The catch is we don't know where the hostages are. We don't know how many guards. We don't know the layout. We don't know schedules. We're flying blind into a hot zone with civilians at risk and no backup. Pete grinned. So it's Tuesday. Despite everything, Colt smiled. Yeah, it's Tuesday. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Hawk pulled up satellite imagery on his laptop. The resolution wasn't military grade, but it was good enough. He traced possible locations in Clearwater where you could hide 6 children and the guards needed to watch them. Old Mill District, he said finally, east side of town, abandoned textile mill, 3 warehouses, rail spur that hasn't been used since the 80s, far enough from residential areas that noise wouldn't draw attention, close enough to town that response time is manageable. If I was holding hostages, that's where I'd do it. Colt studied the image. The warehouses were massive, 50,000 square feet each, high ceilings, few windows, multiple entry points, a tactical nightmare. We need confirmation, he said. Hawk, can you get eyes on the location? Not from satellite. Resolution isn't good enough to see inside buildings, but I can deploy drones, small ones, quiet, thermal imaging. If there are people inside those warehouses, we'll know by morning. Do it. Nash tapped one of the warehouses. If this is where they're holding the kids, we're looking at a hard entry. These buildings were designed to withstand Montana winters. Thick walls, reinforced doors, and Reeves will have guards, professional guards, former military. They'll have overlapping fields of fire, motion sensors, tripwires. This isn't going to be a quick smash and grab. Then we make it a slow, careful infiltration. Colt looked at each man in turn. I need to be clear about something. This isn't official. No authority, no legal sanction. If this goes wrong, we're criminals. Kidnappers fighting kidnappers. The law won't distinguish between us and them. Good thing I never much cared what the law thought, Pete said. Doc cleared his throat. I've got a question. These kids, you said 6. One of them is the waitress's brother. Who are the others? Colt hadn't wanted to mention this part, but they deserved to know. One of them is your granddaughter, Pete. The silence that followed was absolute. Pete's face went very still, very hard, the kind of hard that came right before violence. Lily? His voice was barely a whisper. They took Lily? Your son called Sheriff Garrison 3 days ago, reported her missing. Garrison couldn't do anything. Political pressure from above. I'm sorry, Pete. I didn't know until Wade told me tonight. Pete's hands became fists. The knuckles went white. For a moment, Colt thought he might put those fists through the bar, through the wall, through anyone who got in his way between here and wherever Lily was being held. But Pete was a soldier, and soldiers control their emotions until the shooting started. Then they channeled them into something useful. We get them all out, Pete said. Every single child, not just Lily, all of them. Because if we only save one, we're no better than the men who took them. Agreed. They worked until midnight, drawing up plans, backup plans for the backup plans, contingencies for the contingencies. This was what soldiers did. They prepared for chaos by imagining every possible variation of chaos and planning for all of them. Finally, Hawk closed his laptop. I'll deploy the drones at 0400. We'll have thermal imagery by 0600. That gives us all day tomorrow to refine the plan before dark. Weapons? Nash asked. We use what we have, Colt said. Personal firearms. Nothing illegal. We're citizens defending other citizens. The moment we cross the line into military hardware, we become the bad guys. The bad guys have military hardware, Nash pointed out. Then we'd better be smarter than they are. The meeting broke up. The men filtered out to their bikes. Engines roared to life. One by one, they disappeared into the night. Colt lingered. Pete was still behind the bar, staring at nothing. She's 7 years old, Pete said quietly. Lily, 7. She likes horses and ice cream and those books about wizards. She laughs at my bad jokes. She's the reason I get up in the morning. He looked at Colt. If something happens to her, it won't. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll die before I let them hurt her. Pete nodded, poured 2 more bourbons. They drank in silence, brothers acknowledging truths too heavy for words. Colt left 20 minutes later. The ride back to his motel took 15 minutes. The motel was called The Pines. It had exactly 12 rooms and a neon sign that hadn't worked since Reagan's first term. But the beds were clean and the doors had good locks, and nobody asked questions about guests who paid in cash. Room 7. Colt locked the door, drew the curtains, laid his weapons on the bed. The Colt 1911, the Glock 19, 2 spare magazines for each, a folding knife with a 4-inch blade. Not an arsenal, just tools. The same way a carpenter carried a hammer and saw. He field stripped both pistols, cleaned them, checked every spring, every pin, every surface, reassembled them, loaded them, chambered rounds, engaged safeties. This was meditation. This was prayer. The ritual of preparation that separated professionals from amateurs. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. I talked to Finn. I'll listen for everything. Thank you for helping. Thank you for caring. E. Colt didn't respond. Words were cheap. Action mattered. He'd prove his words tomorrow. He lay down on the bed, fully clothed, boots still on, weapons within reach. Closed his eyes, willed himself to sleep. It didn't come easy. It never did the night before combat. The body knew what was coming. The adrenaline was already building. The old instincts were waking up. The parts of him that had learned to kill and never quite forgotten how. Somewhere in the darkness, Marcus was laughing. That's what Colt imagined anyway. Marcus had always laughed before missions. Said it kept him loose, kept him human. Made sure he remembered that war was insanity, and the only sane response was to refuse to take it seriously. I'm too old for this, Colt whispered to the ceiling. But age was just a number, and tomorrow that number wouldn't matter. Tomorrow, only one thing would matter: bringing those kids home. At 4 in the morning, Colt's phone alarm chimed. He was already awake, had been for 30 minutes, lying still, breathing steady, preparing his mind for what his body would have to do. He rose, splashed cold water on his face, didn't shave. Appearances didn't matter today. He dressed in dark clothes, jeans, black shirt, his leather jacket. Checked his weapons one more time. Holstered both pistols, the Colt at his hip, the Glock in a shoulder rig. Outside, the sky was still black, stars fading as false dawn approached. The temperature had dropped, frost on the windshields, his breath fogged in the air. The Harley started on the first kick. He rode through empty streets to Pete's garage. Hawk was already there. Laptop open, 3 small drones on the workbench, each one the size of a dinner plate. Quiet rotors, thermal cameras, recording equipment. Ready? Colt asked. Born ready, Hawk said. Give me 30 minutes to get in position. I'll launch from the ridge overlooking Old Mill. If anyone's in those warehouses, we'll know. Be careful. Careful is for people who haven't done this before. Hawk packed his equipment, disappeared into the darkness. Colt waited, made coffee, strong enough to strip paint. Pete arrived at 4:30, Nash at 4:45. Doc at 5. They didn't talk much, just sipped coffee and checked equipment and waited for the sun to rise on a day that would end with violence or victory or both. At 5:15, Hawk called. I've got thermal hits, Warehouse B, multiple signatures, 8 adults, 6 smaller signatures, children. They're in the northwest corner of the building, second floor, one large room, guards rotating in pairs every 2 hours. Entrances? 4. Main entrance south side, loading dock east side, emergency exit west side, roof access north side. All of them are going to be watched. Best approach? Roof. They'll have the other 3 covered, but roof access requires a ladder. They're probably counting on that being enough of a deterrent. It's not. Good work, Hawk. I'm sending you the thermal maps now. Study them, memorize them, because once you're inside, you're not going to have time to check a map. The images came through. Colt studied them on Pete's laptop. The warehouse was exactly as bad as he'd expected. Long sight lines, few places to hide. The children were clustered in one room. The guards were spread throughout the building. Smart positioning, professional. At 5:50, Colt's phone rang. Ilara. I'm about to call Finn, she said. Her voice was shaking. I'll listen, I promise. Good. And Ilara, whatever happens today, you stay away from the bank tonight. You hear me? Don't go. Don't cooperate. We're handling this. But if I don't go, they'll know something's wrong. Let them know. By the time they figure it out, their leverage will be gone. Okay. I trust you. She hung up. Colt checked his watch. 6 a.m. Somewhere in a warehouse in the Old Mill District, a 12-year-old boy was being allowed to talk to his sister for 30 seconds. 30 seconds to prove he was still alive, still valuable as a hostage. After today, Finn Brennan would never be a hostage again. The team assembled at Pete's garage at noon. Full daylight, bright sun, cold air. They gathered around the workbench where Hawk had spread printed thermal images and satellite photos. This is a tactical insertion, Colt said. Not a raid, not an assault. We go in quiet. We extract the children quiet. We leave before anyone knows we were there. And if we're discovered, Nash asked, then we adapt. But our priority is the kids. Not revenge, not justice, the children. Everything else is secondary. He laid out the plan. It was simple. Simple plans had fewer failure points. They would approach on foot, after dark. Nash would take overwatch position on the ridge, 800 yards from the warehouse. Long rifle, suppressed. If things went loud, he'd provide cover. Pete and Colt would make the actual entry. Through the roof, Hawk would disable the building's electrical system from outside, cut power, create confusion. In the darkness, they'd move to the second floor. Free the children, exfiltrate through the loading dock, where Doc would be waiting with a van. Questions? Colt asked. Just one, Doc said. After we get the kids out, what happens to the guards? We leave them. They're not our concern. Once the hostages are safe, Sheriff Garrison calls the FBI. Real FBI, not the bought and paid for version. They'll handle Reeves and his men. And if Reeves comes after us, then we'll be ready. They spent the afternoon preparing. Nash test-fired his rifle at Pete's private range. 3 shots, 3 bullseyes at 800 yards. The suppressor worked perfectly. The sound was barely louder than a cough. Doc loaded his van with medical supplies, blankets, water, trauma kits, everything needed to treat 6 children who'd been held captive for 3 days. He didn't pack weapons. Doc's war was over. He fought with bandages and antibiotics now. Pete and Colt went over the warehouse blueprints, memorized entry points, escape routes, the location of every door, every window, every structural support. When the time came, they'd be moving in darkness. There wouldn't be time to check directions. At 4 p.m., Colt called Ilara. Did you talk to Finn? Yes, I listened. There was a train, close, really close, and I heard a bell. Not a church bell, more like a crossing bell, the kind at railroad crossings. And Finn said he could see mountains through a window. That's good. That confirms the location. Old Mill District has active rail lines running through it. We're going in tonight. Tonight? Oh God, okay. What do I do? Nothing. You go to work. You act normal. When 9 o'clock comes and you're supposed to go to the bank, you don't go. You take Finn's belongings and you go to Sheriff Garrison's office. You stay there. You wait for me. What if something goes wrong? It won't. But what if it does? Colt was quiet for a moment. Then it does. But I've never broken a promise yet, and I'm not starting today. The sun set at 7:15. Full darkness came 30 minutes later. The team met at the staging area, an abandoned gas station 2 miles from Old Mill District. They wore dark clothes, no insignia, no identification. If this went wrong, they'd be ghosts. No trail leading back to their families. Nash loaded his rifle, checked his scope one more time. I'll be in position by 2100 hours. When you're ready to move, click your radio twice. I'll click back if the overwatch is clear. Good hunting, Colt said. Nash disappeared into the darkness, moving with the silence of a man who'd spent 20 years hunting things that didn't want to be found. Pete cracked his knuckles. Haven't done a roof entry since Iraq. This should be interesting. Interesting is one word for it, Colt said. Hawk checked his equipment. Wire cutters, voltage meter, laptop. I'll be at the transformer station. When you're inside and in position, I'll cut power. You'll have 30 seconds before their backup generator kicks in. Make them count. We will. Doc started the van. I'll be at the loading dock, headlights off, engine running. The moment you come out those doors with the kids, we're gone. No delays, no hesitation. Understood. They synchronized watches. 20:45 hours. They had 15 minutes to get into position. Then the operation began. Colt and Pete moved through the darkness like shadows. Years of training hadn't faded. Muscle memory was eternal. They approached the warehouse from the north. The blind side, the side facing wilderness and darkness and nothing human. The ladder to the roof was exactly where the blueprints showed it would be. Rusted, ancient, but solid. Colt went first, 30 feet straight up, hand over hand, breathing controlled. At the top, he paused, listened. Nothing. No voices, no footsteps, just wind and distant train tracks and the sound of his own heartbeat. Pete came up behind him. They crossed the roof, tar and gravel, old industrial construction. The roof access hatch was secured with a padlock. Pete produced bolt cutters. One clean cut, the lock fell away. Colt clicked his radio twice. Nash's response came immediately. 2 clicks. Overwatch was clear. They opened the hatch. Darkness below. Colt descended first. Down a metal ladder into a storage room. Boxes, pallets, dust. They moved to the door. Listened. Heard voices. 2 men, guard rotation, talking about football, about money, about anything except the 6 children they were holding prisoner. Colt checked his watch. 2100 hours. He clicked his radio 3 times. Hawk's signal. 10 seconds later, the lights died. Confused shouts, flashlights clicking on, men moving in the darkness, exactly the chaos they needed. Colt and Pete moved, fast, silent, through the storage room, into the main warehouse space, up the stairs to the 2nd floor. They navigated by memory and feel. No lights, no sound except their own breathing. The room where the children were held was at the end of a long corridor. One guard outside, young, maybe 25, former military bearing. He held an AR-15, tactical flashlight mounted under the barrel, sweeping the darkness. Colt didn't give him time to react. Moved behind him, arm around the throat, sleeper hold. The guard struggled, dropped his rifle, clawed at Colt's arm. 10 seconds, 15. His body went limp. Unconscious, not dead. Pete caught the rifle before it hit the floor. They zip-tied the guard's hands, gagged him, dragged him into a side room. The door to the children's room was locked, heavy deadbolt. Pete worked on it with a pick set. 30 seconds. The bolt clicked open. Inside, 6 children, ages 7 to 12, chained to a support beam by ankle shackles. They looked up with wide, terrified eyes, too scared to scream, too shocked to move. Colt knelt down, made himself small, non-threatening. "My name is Colt. I'm here to take you home. We need to be very quiet. Can you do that?" The oldest child, a boy with dark hair and frightened eyes, nodded. "Are you really here? Or am I dreaming?" "I'm really here, Finn. Your sister sent me." Tears rolled down Finn's face. "Ilara? She's waiting for you, but we have to go now." Pete cut through the chains with bolt cutters. The children stood on shaking legs. Colt counted them. 6, all present. A little girl with blonde hair grabbed his hand. "Are the bad men gone?" "Not yet, sweetheart, but they will be." They moved as a group, slow, careful. The children were weak from captivity, frightened, but they followed orders, stayed quiet, trusted these strangers who'd appeared in the darkness. Down the corridor, down the stairs, across the warehouse floor. The backup generator kicked on. Lights flickered. Voices shouted. The guards were organizing, searching, realizing something was very wrong. Colt led the group to the loading dock. The door was 50 feet away. 40, 30. A flashlight beam caught them. A shout. "Contact! East side!" Gunfire. Bullets sparked off concrete. The children screamed. Colt pushed them forward. "Run! The van! Go!" Pete returned fire. Controlled bursts, covering their retreat. The loading dock door burst open. Doc's van was there, engine running, side door open. "Get in!" Doc yelled. "Move!" The children scrambled into the van. Colt lifted the smallest ones, threw them inside. Pete laid down, suppressing fire. More guards were coming. 6, 8, too many. A shot rang out from the ridge. Different sound, heavier. One of the guards dropped. Nash. 800 yards away in the darkness, protecting his brothers. "Go!" Colt shouted at Doc. "Get them out of here." "What about you?" "We'll find our own way. Go!" The van peeled out, tires squealing, disappearing into the night. The children were safe. The mission was complete. Now came the hard part, staying alive. The loading dock erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. Bullets punched through corrugated metal, ricocheted off concrete. The air tasted like cordite and adrenaline. Colt and Pete moved as one. Years of training compressed into instinct. They separated, made themselves harder targets. Pete went left, rolling behind a stack of pallets. Colt went right, diving behind an industrial dumpster. Return fire came from 8 positions, maybe more. Professional spacing, disciplined trigger control. These weren't thugs, they were soldiers. Nash's rifle spoke again from the ridge. Another guard dropped, but the distance was too great, the darkness too complete. He could suppress but not eliminate, not fast enough. Colt's radio crackled. Hawk's voice, strained. "You've got company coming. 2 vehicles, black SUVs, approaching from the South Access Road. ETA 3 minutes." "Copy that." Colt looked at Pete across 20 feet of killing ground, made a hand signal. "Exfil, Route 2. Pete nodded, understood. They moved in tandem, suppressing fire and movement. The rhythm soldiers learned and never forgot. Pete fired 3 shots. Colt ran 10 yards, found cover, fired 5 shots. Pete advanced, back and forth, trading lead for distance, buying escape with ammunition and nerve. A voice cut through the gunfire, amplified. Bullhorn. "Maddox, I know it's you. Former Marine, Desert Storm vet, 67 years old, too old to be playing hero." Vincent Reeves. The voice was calm, amused, the voice of a man who held all the cards and knew it. "You've made this personal now," Vincent continued. "Those children were insurance, collateral. Now they're gone and you've got nothing to negotiate with. Nothing except your own life, which won't last much longer." Colt didn't respond. Words were for diplomats. He was a soldier. Soldiers communicated through action. He ejected his magazine, checked the rounds. 4 left. The Glock had a full magazine, 17 rounds, not enough for a sustained firefight. They needed to break contact, disappear into the night before Vincent's reinforcements arrived. Pete's voice, low, urgent. North wall, service entrance, 50 yards. On my mark. Colt pulled a flashbang from his belt, old hardware. He'd bought it at a gun show 5 years ago from a dealer who didn't ask questions and didn't keep records. Never thought he'd need it. Turned out preparation was never wasted. He pulled the pin, counted. 3, 2, 1, through. The flashbang detonated midair. Brilliant white light, concussive blast, screams of surprise and temporary blindness. In that moment of confusion, Colt and Pete moved. Full sprint, 50 yards across open ground. Bullets chased them, but the shooters were firing blind. Panicked, their night vision destroyed by the flashbang, they hit the service entrance at full speed. Pete had the door open before Colt reached it. They were through, into another corridor. Industrial, dark. Pete slammed the door, through the deadbolt. It wouldn't hold long, but it didn't need to. They just needed distance. They ran, boots pounding concrete. Behind them, the sound of pursuit, voices shouting, coordinating. Vincent's men were professionals. They'd reorganize fast, launch a methodical search, clear every room, every corridor, every shadow. The corridor ended at a junction, 3 directions. Colt chose left. No reason, just instinct. They emerged into an older section of the mill, abandoned decades ago, rusted machinery, broken windows, moonlight streaming through holes in the roof. Pete grabbed Colt's arm. Wait! They stopped, listened. Footsteps behind them, multiple sets, getting closer, but also footsteps ahead, coming from the direction they'd been heading. Pincer movement, Pete whispered. They're trying to trap us. Colt looked up. The roof was 30 feet above them. Metal catwalks crisscrossed the space. Maintenance access from the days when this building housed hundreds of workers and thousands of machines. Up, Colt said. They climbed, hand over hand, rusted ladder rungs that groaned under their weight but held. At the top, they crawled onto a catwalk. The metal was solid. The view was panoramic. Below them, Vincent's men entered the space. 10 of them, flashlights, rifles, moving in formation. Colt and Pete lay flat, controlled breathing, invisible in the shadows above. The men below searched for 20 minutes, checked behind every machine, every pile of debris, found nothing. Eventually they moved on. The footsteps faded. Silence returned. That was close, Pete said. Too close. They waited another 10 minutes, making sure it wasn't a trick, that Vincent hadn't left men behind to watch. Finally, they descended, moved through the abandoned mill like ghosts, found an exit on the north side, emergency door, chained shut from the outside. Pete cut the chain. They slipped out into the night. The cold air hit like a slap. Colt's lungs burned. His legs ached. But they were alive. That was enough. They moved through scrub brush and abandoned rail spurs, put distance between themselves and the mill. Half a mile out, Colt's radio crackled. Colt, this is Nash. You still breathing? Still breathing. Good, because you've got problems. Vincent just put out a call. He's mobilizing everything he has. Every man, every vehicle. They're going house to house in Clearwater, looking for the children, looking for you. Where are the kids now? Doc got them to the sheriff's station. Wade has them locked down. Safe. But Vincent knows they're there. He's planning to hit it. He can't. That's a direct assault on law enforcement. He's desperate. You took his leverage. His whole operation depended on those hostages. Without them, the families can talk. The bank manager can refuse. His timeline is collapsing. He's got maybe 6 hours before FBI gets involved for real. So he's going all in. Colt's mind raced, calculated, predicted. He'll hit the sheriff's station to recover the hostages, but he'll also hit the bank. Tonight, earlier than planned, before anyone can stop him. That's my read too. How many men does he have? Best guess? 20, maybe 25. He's been bringing in contractors all week, kept them hidden. Now they're all showing up. 25 professional soldiers. against one small-town sheriff's department and 4 old veterans. The math wasn't promising. Where's Hawk? Still at the mill, monitoring their communications. He hacked their radio frequency. We're hearing everything. Tell him to get out. Meet us at Pete's garage. We need to regroup. Copy that. The walk back to civilization took 40 minutes. Colt and Pete moved carefully, avoiding roads, staying in the tree line. Twice they spotted patrol vehicles. Vincent's men, searching. They hid until the vehicles passed, then kept moving. Pete's garage was dark when they arrived. They entered through the back door, found Nash and Hawk already there, coffee brewing, weapons laid out on the workbench, a battle plan forming. Status? Colt asked. Hawk pulled up a laptop screen. Vincent's splitting his forces. 10 men to hit the sheriff's station, 10 men to hit the bank, 5 in reserve. He's coordinating everything from a mobile command post, one of those RVs that rich people drive, parked at the old fairgrounds. When? Sheriff's station gets hit at 0200, bank at 0230. He figures by the time backup arrives, he'll have the hostages and the evidence. Then he disappears, probably has a plane waiting somewhere. Private airstrip, out of the country before dawn. Colt studied the screen. The plan was good, professional, exactly what he'd do if he were Vincent, which meant he understood it, and understanding meant he could counter it. We can't defend 2 locations with 4 men, Nash said. We need to choose, the kids or the evidence. We don't choose. Colt's voice was flat, final. We end this, not by defending, by attacking. Everyone looked at him, waiting. Vincent's at the fairgrounds, running the operation. He's the head. Cut off the head, the body dies. His men are contractors, mercenaries. They're loyal to money, not principles. Take away their paycheck, they'll scatter. You want to hit Vincent directly? Pete's eyes widened. That's insane. It's the only play we have. While his men are attacking the bank and the sheriff's station, we go after him, take him out of the game. Then we call in the cavalry. The cavalry being? FBI, real FBI. Wade's been in contact with an agent in Billings, woman named Catherine Brennan. She's clean, not on Vincent's payroll. Wade's been feeding her information for weeks. She's just been waiting for actionable intelligence in jurisdiction. We give her both. Hawk nodded slowly. It could work. If we hit Vincent fast and hard, capture him alive, force a confession, then the political protection disappears. Senator Voss goes down. The whole house of cards collapses. That's a lot of ifs, Nash said. You have a better idea? Silence. Then we move in 30 minutes. Hawk, you monitor communications. Give us real-time updates on Vincent's location. Nash, you're Overwatch again. Find a position with eyes on the fairgrounds. Pete and I will make entry, secure Vincent, extract him before his men know what happened. And if they figure it out, Pete asked, then we improvise. They armed up, checked weapons, loaded extra magazines. Colt holstered both pistols, added a backup knife to his boot. This was it, the final play. Either they walked away or they didn't. There was no middle ground. At 0130 hours, they rolled out. 4 men on 4 motorcycles. No headlights. Moving through Clearwater like the 4 horsemen of some very localized apocalypse. The fairgrounds sat on the west edge of town. 50 acres of empty space used once a year for rodeos and carnival rides and fried food competitions. The rest of the year, it was abandoned. Chain-link fence, locked gates, dust, and memories. Vincent's command RV was parked in the center. Lights on inside, generator running, 2 guards outside, both armed, both alert. Nash peeled off, found a position on the roof of the grandstand. 800 yards, clear sight lines. He radioed in. Overwatch is set. I've got eyes on 2 guards, no others visible. Colt and Pete approached from the south. The fence was 12 feet tall, topped with barbed wire. They cut through it with wire cutters, slipped inside, moved through shadows. The guards were talking, cigarettes glowing in the darkness, complaining about the cold. about missing sleep, about Vincent's paranoia. They never saw Colt and Pete coming. Two sleeper holds, simultaneously executed. The guards dropped, unconscious, zip-tied, gagged, dragged behind a storage shed. The RV door was unlocked. Arrogant, Vincent didn't think anyone would dare come after him here, in his mobile fortress, surrounded by his men. Colt opened the door, slow, quiet, stepped inside. The interior was all business, computer monitors, radio equipment, maps spread across tables. Vincent Reeves stood at the center of it all, tall, muscular, confident. He was looking at a monitor showing thermal imagery of the sheriff's station, planning his attack. He sensed movement, turned, saw Colt. His hand went to his hip, to the pistol holstered there. "I wouldn't," Colt said. His Colt 1911 was already drawn, aimed, steady. Vincent froze, assessed, calculated odds, decided they weren't good. His hand moved away from his weapon. Slowly, no sudden movements. "Maddox, you're persistent, I'll give you that. Where's the evidence? The USB drive from the bank? You think I'm going to tell you? I think you're going to tell me everything, because in about 5 minutes, FBI is going to swarm this location. You can cooperate and maybe cut a deal, or you can resist and spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison. Your choice." Vincent laughed. "The FBI? They're not coming. Senator Voss owns them, owns half the state. You're bluffing." "Am I?" Colt nodded to Pete. Pete held up a phone, screen showing an active call. FBI agent Catherine Brennan, listening to everything. Vincent's expression changed, confidence cracking. "You're making a mistake. I have powerful friends. Your friends are about to become your prosecutors." Outside, the sound of vehicles, multiple vehicles, sirens, flashing lights. The FBI had arrived. Hawk had given them the coordinates, told them the situation. They'd mobilized fast. Jurisdiction established. Actionable intelligence confirmed. Vincent lunged, desperate, going for his weapon. Colt was faster, closed the distance, struck with the pistol, barrel across Vincent's temple. Vincent dropped. Stunned, Pete was on him immediately. Zip ties, professional restraint. "You're under arrest," Colt said, "for kidnapping, for extortion, for about 50 other charges that people smarter than me will figure out." FBI agents swarmed the RV, tactical gear, professional. They secured Vincent, read him his rights, started processing the scene. Agent Catherine Brennan entered, 40 years old, red hair pulled back tight, sharp eyes, sharper mind. She looked at Colt and Pete with an expression that was equal parts respect and exasperation. "You two are either heroes or idiots. I haven't decided which." "Can we be both?" Pete asked. She almost smiled. "Get out of here, before I have to arrest you for vigilante justice. I'll clean this up, but you were never here. Understood?" "Understood." Colt and Pete walked out of the RV, into the night, into freedom. Behind them, the FBI was dismantling Vincent's operation, arresting his men, securing evidence. The tide had turned. At the fairgrounds exit, Wade Garrison waited, sheriff's cruiser, lights off. He rolled down his window. "The bank manager is safe. The children are safe." Vincent's men at the sheriff's station scattered when they heard their boss was arrested. "It's over." "Not yet," Colt said. "One more thing I need to do." He rode through Clearwater one last time that night, to the sheriff's station, where 6 children sat in Wade's office, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot chocolate, reunited with their families, parents crying, children crying, the kind of tears that washed away trauma and left room for healing. Pete's son was there, holding Lily, 7 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes. She was wrapped around him like a small blonde octopus, unwilling to let go, ever. Pete stood in the doorway, watching, his face doing something Colt had never seen before, crumbling and rebuilding at the same time. Lily looked up, saw Pete. Grandpa! She launched herself at him. Pete caught her, held her, his big, scarred hands gentle on her small back, his eyes closed, breathing her in, alive, safe, home. I knew you'd come, Lily whispered. I told the other kids. I said my grandpa would come, and you did. Pete couldn't speak, just held her tighter. Across the room, Roger Whitmore's wife sat with her grandson, 8 years old, the boy Roger had died to protect. She looked up at Colt, tears streaming. Thank you. Roger would... He would want me to thank you. Colt nodded, didn't trust his voice. Finn Brennan sat in a chair too big for him. Ilara beside him, her arm around his shoulders. She looked up when Colt entered, stood, walked over to him. She held out the blue handkerchief, the one embroidered with forget-me-nots. You came back for this. Colt took it, felt the weight of promises kept. I said I would. Thank you, her voice broke. Thank you for giving me my brother back. Thank you for caring when you didn't have to. Someone cared for me once, long time ago, when I needed it. I'm just passing it on. Finn stood, walked over, looked up at Colt with eyes that had seen too much, but would heal with time. Are you really a Marine? Was, long time ago. My dad was in the Army. He died when I was little. But he used to say something about how the real heroes don't wear capes. They just do what needs to be done and don't ask for credit. Your dad was smart. He would have liked you. Colt knelt down, eye level with the boy. You were brave in there, in that warehouse. You kept the other kids calm. That's leadership. That's strength. Don't ever forget that. Finn hugged him, sudden, fierce. The hug of a child who'd been terrified and was now safe. Colt returned it. This was why. This moment. This kid. This proof that sometimes the right thing was also the possible thing. Ilara walked Colt to the door. Outside, dawn was breaking, pink and gold across the mountains. A new day, literally and figuratively. What happens now? She asked. Now you live. You take care of Finn. You finish school. You become a nurse like you wanted. You have a life. What about you? I'll be around. Clearwater's a nice town. Thinking about staying for a while. I'd like that. She paused. The handkerchief. Your wife made it. You must miss her. Every day, but she'd want it used like this. To help people. To make promises that matter. She was like that. Believed in making the world smaller and kinder. One person at a time. She sounds wonderful. She was. Colt walked to his Harley. Pete, Nash, Hawk, and Doc were waiting. The brothers. Together again. Victorious. Hell of a night, Pete said. His voice was thick. Still processing seeing Lily safe. Hell of a night, Colt agreed. They rode together through Clearwater. Down Main Street. Past Rosie's Diner where morning shift was starting and coffee was brewing. Past the bank where FBI agents were cataloging evidence. Past the church where the bell tower would ring at 8 a.m. like it had every Sunday for 100 years. At the town limits they stopped. This was where they'd part ways, back to their own lives. Until the next time. Because there was always a next time. Same time next year? Doc asked. Same time next year, Colt confirmed. One by one they peeled off. Nash toward his gun range, Doc toward his clinic, Hawk toward his cabin and his computers. Pete toward his garage and his granddaughter, who was safe now. Safe because 5 old men had decided that age was just a number, and right was still right, even when it was hard. Colt rode alone to the cemetery. The sun was fully up now, bright and warm. He walked to Marcus's grave, stood there for a long moment. We did it, brother. Brought them all home. Every single one. No casualties, no martyrs, just victory. He placed the bronze star back on the headstone. Keeping this here, where it belongs, with you. Because you taught me that doing right matters more than following orders. The wind moved through the pine trees. Colt took it as an answer. He rode back to the Pines Motel, room 7, packed his few belongings, checked out. But instead of leaving Clearwater, he rode to Pete's garage. Thought you were heading home, Pete said. Changed my mind. I'm thinking Clearwater could use another mechanic. Someone who knows his way around old bikes and new problems. Pete grinned. Partner? Partner. They shook hands, the kind of handshake that was also a contract, also a commitment, also the start of something new. 6 months later, Maddox and Callahan Motors was thriving. They fixed motorcycles, restored classic cars, taught teenagers how to change oil and gap spark plugs, and take pride in working with their hands, the kind of skills that were disappearing from the world and needed to be preserved. Ilara stopped by twice a week, brought coffee, talked about her nursing classes, about Finn who was doing well in school, making friends, laughing again, the way 12-year-olds should laugh. She'd started dating a young doctor at the hospital. Good man, kind, Finn approved. Once a month, Colt visited Marcus's grave, told him about the garage, about the town, about the quiet satisfaction of building instead of destroying, about Pete's granddaughter who came by every Saturday to help sweep the garage and eat ice cream and tell bad jokes that made Pete laugh like he was young again. The town had healed. Roger Whitmore's family had established a scholarship in his name for kids who wanted to study law enforcement, to be the kind of officers Roger would have been proud of. The first recipient was Roger's grandson, who wanted to be a sheriff, like Wade Garrison, like the men who'd stood up when it mattered. And once, on a cold November evening, a woman walked into the garage, middle-aged, tired, scared. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me, are you Colt Maddox?" Colt looked up from the engine he was rebuilding, wiped his hands on a rag. "I am. I heard you helped Ilara Brennan when her brother was taken. I heard you're someone who helps people when they can't help themselves." That's a generous description. My daughter, she's in trouble. Bad trouble. The kind where the police can't help because the people hurting her are the police. I don't have anyone else to turn to. Colt glanced at Pete. Pete nodded, understanding passing between them without words. Colt stood, walked the woman to the small office in the back of the garage, pulled out a chair for her, poured coffee from the pot that was always brewing. "Tell me about your daughter," he said. "Everything. Start from the beginning." The woman's hands shook as she wrapped them around the warm mug. Her story spilled out, piece by piece, fear and hope tangled together. Colt listened, asked questions, made notes. By the time she finished, the sun had set outside the garage windows. "Can you help her?" The woman's voice was barely a whisper. Colt thought about Marcus, about Finn and Ilara, about 6 children who'd gone home to their families, about Pete holding Lily, and Roger's grandson getting a scholarship in a town that had learned what it meant when good people stood up, about the blue handkerchief in his pocket that had made a promise and kept it. "Yes," he said, "I can help her." The woman's eyes filled with tears, relief, gratitude, the kind that came when hope appeared in the darkness. After she left, Colt stood at the garage door, watching the stars emerge one by one. Pete came to stand beside him. "You sure about this?" Pete asked. "No," Colt admitted, "but I'm sure about what happens if I don't." Pete clapped him on the shoulder. "Then I guess we'd better get to work." Inside the garage, the Harley waited, black and chrome, ready for whatever came next, because there was always a next time, always another person who needed help, always another fight worth fighting. Colt Maddox was 67 years old. His knees ached. His back protested every morning. He was, by any reasonable measure, too old for this kind of work. But reasonable had never been his strong suit, and some promises were worth keeping. Some fights were worth fighting. Some people were worth saving. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. The garage lights burned late into the night, plans being made, equipment being checked, 2 old warriors preparing for another mission. Not because they had to, but because they could, because they chose to, because someone had to stand between the wolves and the sheep. And if not them, then who? Outside, Clearwater slept peacefully. Children dreamed without nightmares. Families felt safe in their homes. A town breathed easy because 5 old men had remembered that age was just a number and courage was timeless. The mountains stood watch, silent, ancient. They'd seen empires rise and fall, seen generations born and buried, and they'd see whatever came next. But tonight, they watched over a garage where 2 men planned another rescue, where hope was being packaged into action, where promises were being made that would be kept, because that's what Marines did, what soldiers did, what good men did. They stood post, they protected, they never quit. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, always forward, always ready. Not at 67, not at any age, not ever.